And there are three challenges to power. The challenges are the oppressed, the mediocre, and the discontented and the sick. Okay, so the next thing to recognize is sort of how this manifests within the discourse on power. And what I've done is I've drawn a visualization of this image just so that conceptually you have an idea of what this looks like. Okay, I'm going to erase this now. Alright, so we have political nobility on one, political nobility takes up a third, the exceptional and the privileged and the privileged take a third, and then the last is the happy, or the healthy, and the happy take a third. Okay. So if we're looking at the manifestation of power, right? Manifest power, we recognize that it's going to be divided into thirds, right? A third goes to political nobility, a third goes to the exceptional and the privileged, and a third goes to the healthy and the happy. Now, obviously there is a challenge to each of these repositories or institutions. I wouldn't use the word institutions, but each of these repositories of power. Nietzsche talks about how this attack sort of unfolds, right? The oppressed of all kinds is going to challenge political nobility, right? So that there's going to be a mutually exclusive occupation of this third, meaning that you can't have both political nobility and the oppressed of all kinds occupying or having control of this third of power. So it's an either or, right? It's an all or none, right? So this mutual exclusion, in order to vie for that, there's going to have to be some political turmoil, right? Political nobility is not just going to bow in the face of threats to its power. No, it's going to try and defend its power, right? By all means. So the oppressed of all its kind is going to challenge the political nobility. Right? So the oppressed is going to challenge political nobility, and one of them is going to win. If the oppressed win, then they now occupy, conceptually, this is all conceptually, a third of the totality of power. Remember, this is the step, the last step of attaining exclusive power. The next is, excuse me, the exceptional and the privileged, right? The exceptional and the privileged is going to battle conceptually, or even practically, the mediocre. Right? The mediocre of all kinds, right? So the exceptional and the privileged is going to battle this idea of mediocrity, right? Obviously, I'm not in the political class. The exceptional and the privileged, you know, if those are the terms that I'll be using, I would say that the whole point of my YouTube channel is to battle the idea of mediocrity, right? The idea that, you know, it is okay to sort of slack off and be slothful, not to participate, not to work, not to make valuable contributions. So in a sense, yes, I am battling mediocrity. Right? So there's a sort of ideological war, if you will, between the exceptional and the privileged against this notion of mediocrity. Right? And then lastly, the happy and healthy is battled, as we've seen time and time again. Right? And it's this exclusion, it's this disjunctive account against the discontented and sick of all kinds. So, right, so the happy and the healthy are battling the discontented and the sick. And this is the nature in which the battle, if you will, for power unfolds. So that we totally sort of understand the sequence in acquiring, and actually I'll just use black, in acquiring, in the attempt to acquire power, the first step is a recognition of needed within the group, right? So we needed, remember we talked about this. Recognition of the group, which leads to WH/which the desire for freedom, right? So recognition of the group, which leads to the desire for freedom, as point one. The second point was, after we get that, we argue for justice and equal rights. After we get justice and equal rights, we're going to be looking for privileges. And then lastly, what we're going to be looking at is the attainment of exclusive power. AQUI. Acquisition of exclusive power. The acquisition of exclusive power is a threefold assault on repositories of power. The oppressed are going to challenge the politically elite, political nobility. The mediocre are going to challenge the exceptional and the privileged. And then the discontented and the sick are going to challenge the happy and the healthy. A lot of what we've done up until now is discourses on the oppressed. We've talked a lot about that, and we've talked a lot about the discontented and the sick. What you're going to see is in the sort of second half of book 2, we're going to talk more about this idea of mediocrity and the herd mentality. And it's this idea of mediocrity, according to Nietzsche, it's this idea of mediocrity and herd mentality that threatens the establishment. This idea of the oppressed challenging the political elite, if you will, and the discontented and the sick, I think Nietzsche would argue that the discontented and the sick have almost completely defeated the happy and the healthy, because we, in the what's the word I'm looking for? In opting into, I can't think of a better word, in buying into the Christian moral ethic, then we recognize that there's going to be almost reverence for the sick, reverence for the leper, reverence for those who are dying, right? And that all of our focus has shifted away from the vitality of life to the end game. Why? As we saw in the last section, death becomes the vehicle, the ultimate gatekeeper into the thing that is most desired, immortality. And that immortality is, according to Nietzsche, conflated as personal immortality. So it's this structure that challenges the repositories of power, and what Nietzsche wants to do is specifically articulate the nature of the conflict, if you will.